Hello, here we go again. Another Wednesday. Yes, another Wednesday means another A Photographer Talks. This week, I am coming to you live with somebody who comes from the land of, yes, you guessed it, New Zealand. His name is Dean Treml. Dean first picked up a camera, notably his mother's camera, at the age of 7. After consistently using all the film up in the camera, his mother got wise to it and he started attacking his grandfathers. And sadly, after a little while, both of them became a little bit wise to the idea and started pushing the cameras into places that Dean couldn't access them. However, a number of years later, he was given an Agfa Clack. This kept him very, very happy and amused until the age of 14, after having completed many household chores and earned a few Kiwi dollars. He managed to purchase himself a rangefinder. This lasted for 1 year until he went out and got himself an SLR. And that was very much the end of his original aspiration of becoming a marine biologist. This immediately brought round his full-on dreams of becoming a photographer. In the 30 years that have since passed, Dean has had the pleasure of his career introducing him to a notable amount of wonderful and amazing colleagues, taught him about journalistic integrity, and taken him around the world. It's also shown in the huge contrast between shooting Olympic Games, America's Cup, and international rugby, and that of trying to catch a skateboarder nailing a kickflip. His photos have been published most notably in the New York Times, Sports Illustrated, and National Geographic. As I said, originally from New Zealand, he now lives in Switzerland, where he still tries to attack photography with the same enthusiasm and fervour as that 7-year-old boy that he once was. Please join me in welcoming Dean Treml to your screens. There he is. Yes, we got a smile. He looked a little bit down there initially, but that's because he didn't know when I was going to bring him in. So, hello, Dean. How are you doing?
Yeah, hi, Charlie. I'm good. Thanks for the applause. Makes it feel like there's a vast audience watching on.
Well, I think you'll find that there is. There is absolutely more than you will ever know, and I'll tell you later.
I'm trying not to concentrate on that, to be honest.
No, don't at all. It's good to see you. I'm loving your background. You've definitely sorted yourself out with a nice place to work there.
Yeah. This is underneath the house. We have a workshop and garage and a kind of me space. It's like a dungeon, a crypt, if you like. It suits me down to the ground.
It's great. It's nice. It retains the nice black. It's sort of actually it works very well for a photography location with your film canister up there, and I can imagine. I can just picture sort of off frame. You've got all your trays and your enlarger and all your chemicals. So just as we'd imagine, click on the red light and
Imagine away. Feel free to just populate this room with whatever bizarre things you'd like to have in here.
Yeah, it's good. Well, maybe you can share us a picture later. What it really looks like. So you've been doing well. You've been keeping healthy. I hope you're looking very good.
Yeah, pretty decent. I mean, Switzerland, like every country, has been knocked around by COVID-19. We've had extended periods at home. It hasn't been as hard a lockdown as some countries have experienced. They've allowed people to move around within reason. They monitored cell phone GPS information for a couple of weeks just to see that people were sort of staying away from each other and things like that. And evidently they were, but that would be typical Swiss. So no problems there. But yeah, from a work perspective, it's really made a big difference because obviously international travel has dried up, and as an international sports photographer, it kind of puts a spanner in the works. But life's been good. I can't complain. Everything's fine. We have a vegetable garden that's going fantastically because there's a lot of time to put into it, and little chores around a 150-year-old farmhouse are often and frequent. So yeah, ticking away a few of those too.
Nice. That's good. Well, and obviously you've had a bit of a chance to sort of reflect on your career. You know, when I asked you to pull out some pictures, it gave you an opportunity to possibly think about the photography that you haven't been thinking about. And you know, normally you don't really get much of an opportunity because you're out there shooting the whole time.
It's kind of interesting because sort of going back through, and you forget about a lot of things that you photographed, and it really is quite satisfying to see some of the things that you've done and the places you've been and the people you've worked with and what you've produced. You know, and you tend to be in the moment quite a lot of the time. I know I do. I'm not sort of dwelling on the past a great deal, so the things that have happened or that I've done are not first or foremost in my mind. I don't have photos around the house or anything like that. It's kind of, okay, we've done that, on to the next thing. But yeah, it's some of the photos I saw, I was kind of like, oh, I forgot all about that. That was really cool. So it was interesting.
That's nice. Well, they always say that the next best photograph, or the best photograph, is your next one, should I say? So it is. It's not surprising the amount of photographs you shot over your 30-year career. To try to remember any of them or all of them is a tricky one. So it's. I'm glad we've managed to pull a couple of interesting ones out, more recent, but also from bygones.
Yeah.
So you know, without further ado, I'd like to kick off, and I'd like to kick off with a picture that I remember from when we worked together at Red Bull. It's a really striking shot. It was one I used on our marketing, and you've aptly called it tunnel vision. Putting it up on the screen now, killer shot, like really, really strong. Um, tell us who the athlete was and which tunnel this was in.
Well, the athlete is Sebastian Kienle. He's a German Ironman world champion.
Yeah.
This photo shoot was in 2015 in Costa Brava, Spain, and he was there training with a Swiss triathlete Ironman named Manuel Kung, I think. And I was brought in there to spend 2.5 days basically shadowing him around and trying to get what I could. The first day's sort of interesting because you're always kind of breaking the ice and getting to know one another, but
Of course, yeah.
after that it was really good. We got on quite well, relaxed enough to get some nice natural moments through the course of the days we had. And that was on a long bike ride that the two of them went on up into the hills. The tunnel itself, I have no idea.
I was merely jesting because Switzerland has plenty of tunnels and
Oh yeah, here I could probably tell you, but in Costa Brava, not at all.
no, not at all.
But yeah, that was an idea to do something in a tunnel, not knowing what we'd find or how the tunnels would look. These kind of shots are always a little bit labor intensive because you need 3 people. Of course, you need your subject on a moving subject vehicle, yourself and someone driving the car or whatever that you're on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had someone driving the car. I was sitting in the back with the hatchback open, with Sebastian chasing us furiously down a hill and through this tunnel.
What sort of speeds were you going when you were doing this?
Driving.
Well, either or both. I mean, what sort of speed is he going at? Because obviously with stuff like this,
I should imagine it was 50 or 60k.
Okay, wow, that's pretty feisty speed to be.
Yeah, I mean, he was coming downhill, and I wanted to get a reasonable amount of blur, but I can't remember what it was shot at. Probably around 1/20th of a second. So there was enough blur at that speed, but while still maintaining him fairly solid. Because I was also shouting directions to the driver behind me, in the front of the car, saying, "Slow down, slow down. Okay, speed up, go, go, go." Things like this. So Sebastian's homing in on us.
Exactly. I guess he wasn't really hitting the brakes in the process of this, was he?
Well, he would have to at some point, otherwise he'd end up in the boot with me.
Well, yes, logically, but I mean, you look at the face. He's intently staring down the barrel of your camera, or at least that's what you think, because he's hidden behind the shades.
Yeah.
Pretty.
But yeah, I mean, that was kind of a nice opportunity to get a photo like that, where you have that kind of motion effect, like panning, but you're moving at the same speed as the subject, but in a tunnel, which is a little bit different to the norm. So it kind of really focuses you onto the athlete and his bike and what's going on. So it had the desired effect.
Yeah, it works very well because it really, as you look at it, it kind of pulls you in, makes you
right.
The full-on zooming effect of it. It really it sort of portrays a sense of motion actually as he's
Yeah.
coming towards you. So you've achieved it really nicely, and obviously you're coming on a bend. You've got the glow behind.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Why out of interest, Ian? We'll touch on this because, as we'll see as we'll go through your pictures, you're a bit of a black and white fan, as we can see from your background, which apart from the yellow Nikon box is pretty much black and white. What made you choose to stick that into black and white? Just out of interest.
Like lots of color photos, because it was shot in color. Like lots of color photos, I find that there's a lot of distraction from color, whereas black and white kind of focuses your attention a lot more onto the subject or what you want the people to see. So of all the photos that I did, that one was just screaming out to be black and white, because you're in a tunnel, there's high contrast, and the subject is also quite contrasty.
Yeah.
It really sort of, for me, it works so much better in black and white than it does in color.
Yeah, it definitely stands out.
To be fair, I probably find that 80% of the time.
You do.
But yeah, I do swing a bit more towards the black and white side of things. So yeah, that's to be expected.
Yeah, true. I mean, I wondered if this was a requirement from the shoot in particular, or this was more personal preference. Sounds like personal preference, and obviously
personal preference. I mean, it's more often a requirement to be in color, and I always try and push black and white under people's noses, and hopefully they like it. So it's like a door knocking campaign.
It harks back possibly to the 30 years plus ago when you were nicking your mother's camera, which were you mostly shooting in black and white then? Do you recollect?
No, that was more color actually. I mean, she had a 126 cartridge camera,
okay,
and that was shooting color film. It was color. Color was, black and white was still around, but color was new. But in '86, I started a cadetship at a newspaper, and that was black and white. It was entirely black and white, and that's really what got me going, because I'd shot a little bit of black and white, just one or two rolls, just for curiosity's sake prior to that. And with my own camera, it shot black and white, so I'd shot black and white there as well. But working for the newspaper, shooting in black and white, processing, developing, the whole process kind of is one that I enjoyed. It's very hands-on. It's very magical just to put a photo into a tray of water and see the image appear before your eyes. Something which, unfortunately, people miss out on these days with digital. But I liked it, and I had a go at color processing, but it's a lot more complex, and it just didn't have the same appeal.
I think certain magic disappears actually in the color. I mean, you've got the canister up on the shelf behind you there, which you take into a completely dark room, and there is, you're right, there's that complete magic, and I think that's the birth of it is black and white, and that's possibly why it's more magical than color, actually.
Yeah, I don't. It's hard to quantify, because it's something that's just there, and to try and work out where or what point in your life you became that way orientated, I don't know. But certainly working for the newspaper, where you have to go out and shoot sports, news, whatever the case may be, come back, develop it, make the print look good, get it up to the editor, goes into the paper, and it appears that night. It was very sort of an organic process compared to color, I suppose. The color process was very different. Our newspaper actually in New Zealand was the first in the country to be a test bed for using color in newspapers. And all the photos were really chocolate boxy style photos, because they had to take them away to get the color separations done for printing. And that took, I think, more than 24 hours from taking the photo to getting them developed to taking them away and getting the separations. So our senior photographers loved doing that, and I was quite happy to stick with the black and white.
Yeah. Well, it shows, I mean, obviously I think there's a certain level of love for that's carried you through all these years, and that sort of with your photojournalistic approach shows, and no more so really than in this second set of I would say second image, but it's actually a second set of images that we're going to put up, which is your work from covering Le Mans. Now here, I'll put them on the screen for people to see. Here it's obviously a very different approach than chasing down a tunnel. Here you're kind of the roving photographer. Did you shoot this on film, or is this all on digital again?
This is on digital.
Okay,
yeah.
So here we have a set of 12 images of you documenting the Le Mans race throughout the night. again, tell us a little bit behind this. What year was this? Actually, 2016, I think.
2016.
Yeah.
2016, yeah. Um, I've always been a bit of a petrol head, and Le Mans is probably one of the main motorsport races that I wanted to shoot, wanted to check out. The idea of something going for 24 hours and all the different lighting conditions and things that can occur in that period of time is really appealing. I floated the idea out to do some work with the Porsche LMP1 team, and that was given the go-ahead. So in 2016 and 2017, I did 8 of the World Endurance Championship races, including the Le Mans both years. In 2016, I got along to Silverstone and Spa before Le Mans because I was working in the garage and around the team. I didn't want to turn up at Le Mans, which is the biggest race of the year, and go, "Hey guys, here I am. Let me do whatever I want." So it was good to go to Silverstone and Spa because the team sort of wonders who you are for a while, and then they get used to you, and you learn what you're able to do and when you should stay out of the way and all these kind of things. So. Yeah. After the first 2 races, to turn up at Le Mans, it was just like, oh, hi, here he is again, great. This was really good because it gave me access in the situations where maybe I wouldn't have had it if I just rocked up to Le Mans.
That's familiarity, getting to know people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is kind of a big thing. And I mean, a lot of people like to cherry pick the best stuff out of the things that you can shoot, and I'm no exception, but I want to kind of bed myself in a little bit before I just turn up there and start pointing a camera at everybody. And the drivers like Brendan Hartley, the Kiwi, and Mark Webber and whatnot knew me by then, and we'd had talks and tried to arrange things to do and things like this. So there was no resistance to me doing what it was that I wanted to do. And I mean, that selection of 12 photos is just the 12 that I could lay my hands on quite quickly because, as I told you, I have a computer issue where my computer battery gave up the ghost, and I'm just waiting for a new one to be delivered, so I couldn't plug in my hard drives and go searching. But the output from Le Mans was fantastic, and 2 years in a row doing so much stuff, and I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface.
Yeah.
I feel there's so much more that you can do there. Because I was embedded with the Porsche team the whole time, but I could sort of slope around and do other things as well. It wasn't that I had to be 100% dedicated to them, but it was good to have that ability to be so involved with one team that you had a better understanding of what was going on with them. In 2016, I mean, the couple of photos towards the end, 2016 was a fantastic year for outcome because Toyota, for the very first time, were right on target to win the race. They were in the lead. There was 1 lap to go, and their car broke down on the start-finish line. And the Porsche overtook it, did 1 more lap, and won. This was devastating for Toyota, of course, but it was fantastic for Porsche, and that was who I was interested in. Yeah. All the photographers were down in the Toyota garage waiting for the celebrations to happen because it was the first time Toyota would have won, and I was pretty much the only photographer in the Porsche garage because, dejection is also good to photograph as well as celebration.
And this was something we're not expecting. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when this happened, the incredulous looks on the face of the team and the other drivers that were watching the screens in the garage and all the management and all the higher ups, shall we say, from Porsche and everything. It was hugely emotional, and once they crossed the finish line, it was uproarious madness going on in the garage, and it was great to be there. And a few photographers came running in at the last minute, but I had the lion's share of it, so it was quite nice.
Yeah, very nice. It's quite difficult to almost keep your hat on in somewhere like that when the emotions have gone from one complete extreme to the other. Did you feel that you almost wanted to throw your camera on the floor and celebrate yourself because it was such a sort of shock?
No, I mean, I can separate myself from these things quite easily. I think maybe the camera becomes a barrier as well. But in some situations, you do feel the emotion of what's going on, and you can be working away and concentrating, but still choking back a bit of emotion because, especially if you know people, it's a lot more. If you don't know the people, then it's easy just to dismiss it and go, "Oh, this is really cool." But when you know the people and you can sort of relate to their feelings, then
you channel it, really, I suppose. Then you channel it through your camera and come out with the best results you possibly can, which clearly show in these pictures. There's this story there of kind of the build, the race, the sort of almost the resolution that, oh, it's not going to happen, and then suddenly the bang, good God, wow, didn't expect
I
that.
mean, it's just amazing. I mean, for me, it's just so indicative of endurance racing that in a 24-hour race, it was won after 23 hours and 59 minutes. Because one car couldn't go 24 hours, and how incredible is this as a story? It's amazing. So to be there the first time and document that, it's kind of like, okay, I guess I've already hit the peak of stories from this particular event. But,
and hence you've not actually been back since. That's it, no more. No.
Yeah, well, I went back the next year, and Porsche won that year as well, and with one of the Kiwi drivers, Brendan Hartley, driving. The first year, Neil Yanni, the Swiss driver, was driving, so I had a foot in both camps in that regard. But no, Le Mans is an amazing beast. It's really quite incredible. One of the toughest things to decide when you're photographing a 24-hour race is when should you have your 2 or 3 hours sleep. And both times I did it, I went in the late hours of the morning, going through the night, because I want to shoot as much night stuff as I can, because that's highly appealing. But ideally, you don't want to sleep at all. It's just, you feel like you're missing out. You go away for 2 hours and sleep and have a shower and head back out, and you feel like you could have missed so much.
But then again, if you haven't, and then you're flagging at that very most important moment of 23 hours and 59 minutes, then that would have been more disastrous.
Yeah, it would have been a bit tragic if I'd been out the back snoozing in the tyre bay.
Absolutely. So look, moving on from racing and black and white, so let's inject a bit of colour into this conversation. Or there's plenty of colour in it already, but into the picture, I'm going to put up a cliff diving. So we've talked about racing and bikes, clearly super interesting, but something that you spend a lot of time whizzing around the world on a normal, if we can use that word, basis, is to shoot cliff diving. And here we have a pretty cracking shot, frankly. I love the way that you've separated the diver here. Looks as though he's going to land at some point on the countless amount of inflatables. This is one of your strongest shots, really, from cliff diving. Tell us about this one.
This was in Sisychon in Switzerland, in, where are we? I think 2018. And it's one of those locations where, with the lake, it's fairly flat and easy, so a lot of spectators like to come on inflatable boats and rafts and things like this. So on the event day, we had a beautifully sunny day and a lot of spectators. I can't recall how many, but there would have been a few thousand just on the water alone in inflatable boats. Wow. And this was just a shot where with the cliff diving, we're often trying to show the environment, because with the guys diving from 27 meters and above sometimes, and the women around 21, you want to see that the fact that they're diving from a great height, and you want to show that as much as possible. Zooming in on the diver is interesting sometimes, but it doesn't really give cliff diving what you need to give it.
No, exactly.
This was one of those instances where you could access an angle to see the diver going down and have the boats in the shot in this way. The trick was to be able to get that little bit of separation between the diver and the boats, otherwise you'd lose them completely.
I mean, all of your shots really cliff diving, as you say, generally taking in the height of the cliff or the dramatic nature of the cliff that they're bouncing off. But you've achieved something very different here. I think the separation, obviously using your depth of field, we talked about it before, is obviously one of your tricks here that is really sort of proven.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a chronic wide open aperture shooter. This is something which I started to do right when I was sort of getting into the newspaper, and I was trying to differentiate what I shot from the other photographers, and I found that most of the time, especially with news, a lot of photographers like to have a sort of a bit of safety in there, so they'll be shooting at a smaller aperture to have a little bit more depth of field. And I used to sort of risk it a lot more and shoot as wide open as I could and try and get that separation. I did that a lot of the time by using longer lenses than other people, just to get it as you do.
Yeah.
But then in later years, I started using a lot more prime lenses with f1.4 and this kind of thing, so you can get it. That particular shot was with a 105, beautiful Nikkor 105, 1.4, It's a fantastic lens, and that was shot at 1.8, at 8,000th of a second. I could have shot it at 1.4, but I kind of thought, yeah, that 2/3 of a stop, that'll make all the difference to my ability to get him sharp or not. But it worked out. I only had to shoot it the one time. And it's important to pick the divers who do a certain dive where you can actually see a nice form in the air. And Jonathan in that shot comes out of the dive beautifully, so it looked kind of nice because he's very calm and poised looking, and then there's a lot of boats underneath, which would kind of give you the impression that maybe he's not as well off as you might think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's a very sort of calming photograph in a way. He feels clearly kind of confident that he's done what he needed to do. He's just on the exit before he
Yeah, that's the thing, because to get that angle, you had to wait till the diver had gone down a little bit further. A lot of them are coming out of twists and somersaults, and they're going into a Barani, or they're coming out of a twist and they're a little bit tweaked up and not looking so good. So there's a few divers that you can shoot in different places that look better than others.
Have you learned lots of diving skills in all the years of photographing them?
I have jumped off things on occasion. I would say that my marks would be probably in the lower part of the spectrum.
Sort of 2.7 meters as opposed to 27.
I think 13 is my highest dive, and I mean,
wow.
The divers have become friends. I've been shooting the cliff diving now since 2008. The World Series began in 2009, and I've been on it since it began. So many of the divers and the crew and everybody involved have become like a big family, and we often end up in places with each other in between events or whatever, and quite often with these guys they'll say, this is a great place and there's a bridge just down the road, let's go and jump off it. So you find yourself getting dragged in now and again, and not unwillingly, so it can be quite good fun.
There's your familiarity again, really, isn't it? With
it's an important thing a lot of the time, because it really does give you a lot more access and ability. I try to describe to people that often that I like to shoot in a way that is fly on the wall, and that's what I told the Porsche guys as well before I got the gig. I don't want to be in there manipulating anything or whatever. I just want to be standing back or moving to a side where I can sort of get what it is that I want and shoot it without flash, without any motor drive that's taking 10 shots per second. Just take a couple of shots and get what I want and move away, and not irritate or be noticed. And once people get comfortable with you, you can do this so easily. I mean, it's a good way to work, I find. But once people know you and they know that you're not doing anything that they're not going to like, then you can get pretty much whatever you want. Yeah.
Well, actually, I completely agree. Nothing really says that better than this next shot that you sent me of Tiger Woods. That's kind of almost a classic example, really. You're sort of sneaking around trying to find your opportune moment and the perfect spot to get an image that, quite frankly, when I pop it on the screen, it looks as though he's looking directly at you and you've asked him to look at you, but the story behind it is quite something different. So I particularly like this. Very striking. But
Thanks.
This is a case where actually you shot it without him noticing.
More or less. It was in 2002 in New Zealand. Tiger Woods came down for the New Zealand Golf Open. His caddy, many may know or not, was a guy called Steve Williams, who was a Kiwi. And so Tiger came down to New Zealand for a week and played in the Open. He did pretty averagely after the first day. I think he was hardly made the cut and finished off 5th or 6th. But he was there playing, and of course it attracted a huge amount of media, both from New Zealand and elsewhere. And golf courses are funny things because you can move around, you have access, but you have to be very quiet and you have to move slowly. You don't want to distract the golfer when they're about to line up a shot or they're preparing and things like this, to the point that you can get escorted off the course if you're not careful. And Tiger has this habit often of just crouching down, as many golfers do, and just viewing the ball when it's on the green. And it was always a trick was to get to the green and sort of, I was thinking if I can get across when he's down and get directly opposite him, I can get the shot like the one that you just showed. But of course, each time I'd get there, things are happening. Someone goes to play a shot, someone else goes to play a shot. You can't move, you're stationary. you've got to navigate a bunker and other things. And I wanted to do it so that other people didn't know what I'm doing, because when you're around a lot of other photographers, they sometimes pay attention to things that are happening, and they'll go, "What's he up to? Oh, I see. I'm going to do that too." So I think it was not until it was after halfway through the round when I managed to get to this other side of the green and get that shot as he was lining up his putt. But yeah, happy with the end result.
Yeah, I mean, it's really striking. Obviously, no one else is in the way. He's zoning in, visualizing where he's going to take it, and it's really effective. You know, very much just sort of you're questioning as to whether he's actually really looking at you, and you're doing kind of almost like a commercial shoot pose.
Yeah, well, if judging from the look on his face, if he was looking at me, the things he was about to say to me wouldn't have been too pleasant.
Maybe not. That's the beauty of a photograph, isn't it? We can all decide what exactly we want. But from the perspective of that, it's great. Is that one of your sort of favourite shots, really, from your sports catalogue?
I don't. It's a favourite. I like it because of the effort that I had to put in to get it. You know what I mean? I mean, I could have gone through 18 holes and not got it, so I'm happy that I got it. Tiger Woods was the man of the moment, more or less, back then, so it was good to have a shot of someone like that was different to what anyone else got. I really can't put a finger on shots. A lot of shots that stand out more than others. Sometimes it's more about the experience, like the Le Mans thing.
Yeah.
For me, the experience of Le Mans is fantastic, the whole thing. So it's an enjoyable thing to photograph. The photos might not be as good as other things, but from my perspective, it's one of the ones that's top of the pile. Cliff diving also. I said to myself years ago that I wouldn't want to be one of those photographers that ends up doing the same thing year in and year out. I've seen at events like the Melbourne Open, tennis photographers that come running into court number 4 at 4:15 in the afternoon because they know that the light at that time is shining through and they can get the shadow in here, and as the guy serves they can get the black, and they come in there for 10 minutes and sit in the stand, 5 or 6 of them, and shoot the shot, and then they disappear off to do something else. And you think it's a bit sad because you've been doing that for how long, and it's not fresh or new, so I never wanted to do something like that, but cliff diving is such an enjoyable sport to shoot, and the people are so accessible and friendly that it's been over 10 years now, and I'm happy for it to continue. I feel very fortunate.
I mean, something like cliff diving, obviously it's visually spectacular. Really, I think of all the locations you've been to and all the shots I've seen of yours from those locations, they're really not they're not boring, are they? I mean, cliff faces in Thailand and
I liken it to people because there's no protection. They're wearing underwear, effectively, and it's just mental and physical versus gravity and impact, and people can relate to it because everyone's jumped in the water from 1 meter and landed on their belly or their back and gone, "Oh my God, that hurt so much."
Yeah.
When someone's backflipping a motorbike, you can look at it and go, "Wow," but you can't appreciate what's actually going on. Yeah. So I think it's diving, generally, Olympic diving, all diving, is something which is much more tangible for people than a lot more of the extreme sports which aren't.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and obviously, hence why it keeps your interest, I would say. And it's not just about the locations, but it's the realism effectively behind it.
Yeah, it's the sport itself which I find totally engaging, but also the locations we go to, as you said, the locations make it so spectacular, and they do a lot of the work with the photography, to be fair. You have some spectacular spots on the globe, and it's nice to be there and have such a photogenic subject to put in the middle of it all.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, it's not always about sport though, is it? The next image I'm going to throw up on screen is a black and white of a very glamorous lady. Now, this is very, very different. My initial thoughts were this has to be somewhere like Cannes or Nice or a film festival or something like that in south of France or Los Angeles, but it's from your home country, I believe.
No, it's not actually from my home country. It's from my home ocean of the South Pacific. But it's from the island of Rarotonga in the Cook Islands.
Okay. Apologies. Now, this is very different, completely different. Nothing like what we're seeing. What's the story behind this? Because this is, as I say, something else.
Yeah, I lived in Rarotonga for 5 years. and I moved up there and ended up working as a photographer because I went there for a 3-week holiday and thought, it's not bad here. I could actually do something. And they didn't have any professional photographers.
Lucky.
So, yeah, I was doing a bit of everything. I was doing weddings and portraits and sports and working for the newspaper and commercial work, tourism work, everything that was available to do. Traditionally, they used to fly photographers up from New Zealand or occasionally Australia to do shoots, and then I was able to do a lot of it. One of the things I like most about photography is diversity. I don't like doing the same thing over and over. It's great to do sports, but I like to do different sports. It's nice to do news. It's nice to do reportage, and things like this can be fun too. This was shot for the black pearl industry. There's a big black pearl business running out of the Cook Islands, and this was shot as a promotional photograph for them. There was, for some strange reason, on an island of 32 kilometres in circumference, a Rolls Royce. So we found the appropriate model and dressed her and applied makeup and hair styling and all the appropriate pearls, and got her stepping out of this Rolls Royce to make it look like it was, like you say, arriving at a gala event.
Exactly, you did that. You did that very well, and obviously it blends particularly nicely with your black and white, your love of black and white, and your theme of black and white.
Yeah.
Do you do many shoots along these lines? Because when was this? What year?
I would say that was around 96, 97, something like that, because I was there from 93 to 98, and it would have been towards the end, well, middle to end. So yeah, back then. I mean, yeah, I did quite a lot of fashion work when I was there. There's manufacturers for swimwear and this kind of thing on the island, so getting girls and guys out onto the beaches and in the water and at the resorts and this kind of thing, I was doing quite a lot of.
Is it something that you look to try and do nowadays at all? Would you sort of go off and...
No, probably not. I mean, I don't mind doing it, but I don't find it's overly creative. One of the things with photography is if you take an attractive woman and put her in nice clothes and take a photo, everyone loves it.
True. I was referring more to sort of commercial shoots where you have to put everything together. You know, obviously all the shots that we've seen now, you're kind of given a scenario and you have to shoot it. Whereas this, you're given a brief and bring the car, bring the model, bring the stylist, bring the everything all together. That's somewhat different to sort of everything else that we've discussed.
Yep, I enjoy doing it. If someone comes to me with something like this, I'm more likely to say yes than no, because, as I say, I like the diversity. I like walking into the unknown because it challenges me. So yeah, it's not something that's knocking on my door. But I mean, I'm not running around looking for that kind of work. I have done a little bit of commercial work over the last few years as well, but nothing of that sort. And I don't envision it on the horizon. It's not a kind of work I would actively seek.
Nice to have done it though. Nice to have done it and have really strong images like that in your portfolio. Again, very different, but harking back to kind of more your automotive, shall we say, is the sort of next and last shot, which I really wanted us to show because I'm personally a big Wes Anderson fan, and I mentioned this to you over a phone call that this particular hotel has been featured on the front of a book by accidentally Wes Anderson on Instagram. Very, very cool profile. If you haven't seen it, go follow it.
I'll check it out.
And this is great. I mean, I love this shot, but it's got a really. I didn't actually know about the hotel and the story, so. I think it would be really nice to hear why you chose to place this graciously amazing car in front of this, well, wonderful, at least at one time in its life, hotel. So we have here the Aston Martin of James Bond, shall we say, in front of the Belvedere Hotel of the Furka Pass.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Belvedere and the Furka were featured in I can't remember, some Bond movie with Sean Connery. I don't recall off the top of my head which one it was. But the Belvedere Hotel was built right next to the Rhone Glacier. It was a huge hotspot for tourism. People would come there and still can and go through ice tunnels to go and view the glacier. But the glacier has receded so much in recent years that tourism has all but dried up. The Furka Pass in itself is a well-known pass, along with many other ones in Switzerland, and make fantastic driving. They're really, really nice experiences. But the hotel in itself just ran out of business. It required renovation. I heard that the foundations were starting to move, so they'd have to look at doing something about that. So they just shut the doors. I find something kind of sad about closed hotels and pubs and things like that, because they've brought so much life and fun into people's lives.
Of course,
and moments when they've stopped on holiday and things like that. And when you see them closed down and just neglected, it's kind of unfortunate, because there's so much history that's gone behind that. I know that in New Zealand, there's every little town had a pub in the middle of it, and then as business became more city-based and farming was not such a thing, and the pubs would close, there's just these big forlorn buildings sitting around, and this Belvedere Hotel for me is one of those. Case of one of those. And I was out there driving in the autumn time, which is a great time to go there because there's not so much traffic. The tourists aren't there like they are in the summertime, when it's just a cavalcade of motorbikes and cars and camper vans and things just traveling around all these passes. And in the autumn, the colors are fantastic. It's sometimes a bit of a shame to shoot black and white, but this particular shot lent itself very well, because it just like Paul Simon says, everything looks worse in black and white, and it sort of adds to the mood of the photograph. I'd driven past there and sort of looked at the shot, and I went up the road a little bit and stopped a bit, and then I saw the sky had changed and was becoming a little bit more contrasty, so I shot back down and did this photo. It was late in the afternoon, there was no one around.
And you shot it at one of your favourite apertures as well.
What was it, f2?
No, I think when I looked at this the other day, it was it might be 1.8 actually, 1.8, 1.4. I'd have to dig, but my point with it was very it was very wide open in comparison to a lot of people who.
I mean, that was shot with a Nikkor 35mm f1.4. I tend to default to f2 most of the time. Even when you're shooting with a wide angle and you know that there's a lot of depth of field, I find that with something like this, you still will get, especially with the file sizes of cameras like the D850, which are 45 megapixel, you get so much information that when you're looking at a high-res image, you do see the change in the depth of field. So you get a subtle separation, and I much prefer this to just having everything sharp.
Yeah, it certainly adds a certain level to it of almost unreality in a way. It's just a tiny separation. It's beautifully kind of standing proud. You're showing this hotel off in the glamour that it sort of once was, obviously with the striking car in the background. But you've placed it beautifully with the starkly declined glacier in the background.
I mean, effectively, it's a photo of the car, but
is it now? But that's a matter.
It's also not. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, from a personal perspective, my eyes obviously drawn to three things in a way. You've got the car bottom right, then you've got the hotel middle, and you've got the glacier back left. And so you sort of placed it all nicely. You're telling an entire story there in one picture, really.
Thank you. Yeah. I like it.
It's kind of a scene from another James Bond movie, isn't it? He's just gone up there and you half anticipate him finding something drastically bad in that hotel, and then the next scene he's up on the glacier. So
Yep, that sounds like you've been writing the scripts.
I have. Just don't tell anybody for the next film. But so that brings us to kind of the end of the images that we said we'd discuss. Although there's one particularly special one which I understood you shot for something recently, which I'd like to throw up, which kind of I think tells a nice story about the type of photographer, the type of cameras that you use. So it's your sort of generations of cameras that you've used over time, which goes, I think, in a way, a little sort of in part to explain your love of black and white. We've discussed it slightly now, and what frequency do you bounce between these now? We've just touched on the D850 from shooting that last shot, But on screen, you've got an Olympus, a Ricoh, and a Nikon F4. How often do these cameras come out nowadays?
I mean, the Ricoh is just a display piece. That was my first rangefinder, was the Ricoh 500.
So is that the one that you got when you were 14?
That's not the actual one. No, that was actually one that ironically, my wife Romina had.
Oh, nice.
So she had nearly the exact same model as what I had. I think the only difference between that one and my one was mine had a multiple exposure mode. Something that you should play around with a couple of times and then go, nah. And so yeah, that just sits on a shelf with a bunch of old cameras that we have in the house. The Olympus, I have 4 or 5, 6 lenses for, and I run film through it occasionally. Sometimes going on holiday, I'll take that instead of digital.
Yeah.
I like to shoot film now and again because it reminds you to slow down and look at what you're doing and not just push the button willy-nilly.
Of course.
I think it's one of the hallmarks of the modern photographer that you have access to unlimited memory and 10 frames per second, so you just push the button and check out what you got afterwards. And the film lets you slow down, consider the shot, and decide whether you want to spend the money on that particular photograph, or you think, no, it's not worth it, and move on. So it's nice that just to sort of train your mind, or my mind, back to shooting in that way, because I don't like shooting heavy, and I've never been a particularly heavy shooter. I was writing something recently where I'll just try and dredge this out of my memory, talking about digital versus film, and I think 1,800 shots, which is not a lot for a lot of people to shoot these days at 1 gig and more.
Yeah.
Back in the days of me sort of kicking off photography, it would have cost 1,000 francs in processing and film. So if you had a bill of $1,000 every time you went out and did a job, you probably wouldn't shoot so heavily either. So
Exactly.
you'd go and shoot an entire game of rugby and come back with 2 or 3 rolls of film.
Yeah.
36-shot film. So it's more about kind of picking your shots and picking your angles and knowing what it is that you want to get, rather than shooting everything, which admittedly sometimes you have to do, but it's how I prefer not to do it like that. So the film is good for slowing me down. And the F4 was the first pro camera that I ever bought. And it's one of those cameras, as you're driving, you're sort of climbing up through the ranks of photography and things like this, and you see these cameras that you always aspire to, and lenses and things, and that was the first kind of new pro spec camera that I ever bought. For me, the Nikon F4 is one of the best looking cameras ever made. It's just an incredible looking beast, and it still works today. I can stick any of the lenses that they make now for the D850 onto the F4, and they autofocus or they manual focus, and they function beautifully. And I don't use it for work. I just like to hold it. It feels nice in the hand. It's a bit nostalgic. I have it sitting around in the house all the time, and often I'll just take it out to photograph things around home, family life, and things like that.
When you pick it up, does it take you back? Does it zoom you sort of back 10 years?
No, I'm probably not that intricate. I just like it because it's a camera. I think I bought it in '89 or '90, so it's got some years on it. But it's just a camera that I really enjoy. That and the OM1. The OM1 is a great camera. It's 100% manual. The only thing the battery works on it is a light meter. And the light meter is a plus and a minus with a needle that goes up and down. So if you don't have a battery, you can still use it. Back when I was shooting with cameras like that all the time, pre-digital, and you didn't have the screen on the back, my brain worked like a light meter. I could see light and work out what the exposure was without even thinking about it. So I've lost that now because we've become lazy, but I could do that without any trouble at all. And that camera was just so nice and small and compact and fantastic optics. And it was the camera that I used at the newspaper. That's not one of the newspaper cameras. I bought that subsequently, but when I had my first job, those were the cameras that we were given to use.
So back then when you were at the newspaper, you used to process all your own film, and obviously we've talked about the canister on the shelf behind you. When you go and use these now, do you process your own work, or do you send it off to a lab?
No, I mean, I have some of the equipment to do that, but it's just a matter of finding the space and the time to get it all set up and then do it. So no, now I send it away and get it processed.
Do you think you will?
Sorry?
Do you think you will sort of go back to it and get the trays out and the chemicals?
I tell myself I will, but who knows? You know, when things slow down a little bit, I mean, you know, and you have the opportunity in the space. I certainly have the space now, so
Yeah.
if the opportunity presents itself, I'd definitely like to set something up and do that and have something to show my son that he probably wouldn't see otherwise in life as he gets a bit older, like how photography used to work, and again to go back to the magic of the darkroom and to create an image on a piece of paper. I think it's something quite special.
Yeah, well, I think I asked you to give me a little phrase about sort of what maybe influences you, or who influences you, or what you kind of feel about photography, and you said to me, "I embrace the dark." Now, if you were to apply that to your kind of methodology there, then surely you should really get the dark room going, shouldn't you? And you should embrace the dark.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, potentially. I mean, I spent a lot of time in dark rooms when I was younger, so
You feel
it's
you've
not a
done your
familiar
time.
environment.
No,
Hmm?
you feel that you've done your time.
No, it's something I'd like to go back to for sure. Because black and white being something which is uncommon these days, to get it done for you costs money.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
to do it yourself, you can cherry pick the best shots, you can print them how you want, and I mean that's one of the arts of black and white is the printing, the dodging and the burning features that are on Photoshop now, but a lot of people maybe don't know the origin is how you used to put your hands under the enlarger lens to adjust the amount of light that hits a certain part of the photograph. So um, you had photographers that were well known within the newspaper industry and things like this because of their ability to create a great print.
Yeah.
Some could, some couldn't. You know, in the same way that today you have photographers that are technically fantastic on Photoshop and can create the most polished and amazing looking images. Um, it's just a analog and a digital version of the same thing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it is exactly. I mean, you mentioned to me about your influence, if any, if you had any influence, as being Ridley Scott. Now, Ridley Scott is clearly someone who's sort of manufactured incredible environments, more like kind of the modern day Photoshop world. What is it really about him that kind of influences you, inspires you? Is it his nod to the dark, kind of?
Um, this is something I only really sort of put together in my mind 3 or 4 years ago when I was talking to someone about this and why I liked not using flash and shooting in lower light situations and this kind of thing and not trying to light things brighter. Um, and Blade Runner came out in 1982, and I found it to be a fantastic movie. It wasn't a big hit at the time, but I think I went and saw it at the theatre about 5 times over the course of 2 weeks because I enjoyed it so much. Just the grittiness and the way it was lit and the mood that was conveyed in the movie. And I mean, he did Alien and subsequent Alien movies and others too, but I think that particular movie has stuck with me, and I've seen it multiple times. And I just like the feeling that it gives. I like how cluttered things can be, but yet the image of what you want to see is still clear, and there's mist and smoke and objects that become a part of the shot in the foreground, but yet you're still focused on what's happening. And I think that subconsciously Ridley Scott definitely had an influence on the way that I like to take photos.
Yeah.
Because if I find myself in a situation where that's possible, then that's what I go for. Unfortunately, it's not always something which your client wants. And people say, well, why is the shot so dark? You could have opened it up a little bit more or turned up the ISO, but but this is how I like it and this is how I'd like to see it. So I've been fortunate too that clients have indulged me when I basically stopped using flash completely. I mean, I had clients over the years. You build up a bunch of people that you work for, and they have an expectation, and therefore you light things in a certain way. But I was never a fan of flash, and it was more something that I did as an obligation. And when I moved to Europe in 2008, I pretty much sort of phased it out. And I don't think I've even travelled with a flash in my bag for shoots for 8 or 9 years, at
But
least.
there's a
I mean,
wonderful freedom. There's a wonderful freedom that comes with that. Obviously, far less
well,
equipment.
100%. I mean, that's one of the things too, is I like to travel light. So often with going to the cliff diving, I would take 2 camera bodies and 4 lenses, and they're all primes. So that the ability to shoot a sport that you know so well, and you can say, well, this is all I need. I know that's all I need. Is fantastic. I mean, I spent 2 days shooting the cliff diving just with a 35mm f2, and just using my feet to zoom and just shooting it in that way. And it was amazing. You know, I can still do the job quite well just with that one lens. And it's an interesting exercise as well, just to sort of step away from the easy approach and to look at things in a different way and to challenge yourself to get the shots that you wouldn't have maybe thought about otherwise.
Yeah, yeah. It shows a good level of skill, really, and that you can kind of master. Well, you master the light or you master the dark, shall we say, with just a small amount of equipment. So it says a lot, and I think that's it's very notable and interesting to hear that that's how you like to operate.
Yeah, I figured, you know, you have to set yourself apart. So I figured, like, underexposed and out of focus, that can be me.
I don't think any of those shots were underexposed and out of focus, but they were definitely quite dark. So, would you say, out of there's images that we've looked at with projects we've talked around, are there any shoots that stand out as being your kind of most memorable, your most favourite in all those years? Be that rugby from the ball behind you, or skateboarders, or whatever?
I mean, there's been a few. I mean, there's not one memorable one. I remember my first week working at the newspaper back in 1986, and the Queen was visiting New Zealand at the time, and she was touring through where we lived. And I was sent out with a more senior photographer, Mark Smith, and an activist bared his bum to the Queen as she paraded through this town. And I managed to get a shot of it. I was quite stoked, but Mark got a much, much better shot of it. So I was... And, you know, I looked at my shot afterwards and I went, yeah, that's rubbish. But at the same time, I was happy to be able to be in the situation where I could recognize that that was the photo to be taking.
Yeah.
But that was kind of an interesting thing because it was my first job as a photographer. And within a week, I was photographing the Queen in a protest. So it was a good little baptism by fire, if you like. But it was good to see how it worked and to have a more experienced photographer alongside you who, you know, did it properly.
Yeah, who shows you and confirms your initial idea.
Yeah, and I mean that's something which, you know, when you pose that question to me, that kind of jumps into my mind for some reason. And I mean, there's been lots of things that I've done over time, and you know, that was an example of getting a shot, but not a great one. And that happens sometimes too. You know, you can't always get the gold.
No, but, very true.
I think it's one of the things is you know, if you make a mistake, say, yeah, sorry, it's my fault, I messed up.
Yeah.
And can we move on from this? and you always can.
Yeah, of course you can. Well, there's one question. We're sort of rapidly approaching our hour now, but there's one question that someone watching posed, and he would like to know how you used to cool off after a long day's shooting on the photo boat tearaway on the America's Cup course. So that clearly means something to you with a smile like that.
Yeah. This boat tearaway was a small photo boat that held 4 photographers, and we used to be the same 4 photographers that used to go on, and we had the same driver all the time. And one of the ways of cooling off, it wasn't even after shooting. It was sometimes you'd go out there and you'd be waiting for the wind, and the boats are just sitting there calm and not doing anything. So the Hauraki Gulf in New Zealand is a nice spot to go for a dip. So you always just sort of take your clothing off and jump off the boat.
Oh, I see. That's the way this is going.
Seems fairly logical, right?
Nice. Respect to that viewer who wanted to know the secret behind that one.
That viewer is probably someone who I refer to as Carnage.
Right, he may well be. So let's see. We are hitting the 59 1 hour. So I'm gonna look to wrap this up. We've had I don't believe really where that hour has gone, but I would like to ask you a question. Something I didn't manage to ask is sort of the way you think that you will look to do business differently, or the way things will change going forward. But obviously, you know, we're all at home and we're still sort of suffering due to COVID. Is there one thing that you think will change forever as a result of the situation we're now in, as COVID itself?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things, but I mean, one thing for sure is going to be people's attitude to travel, and the necessity to travel. It's something that's dear to my heart, obviously. A great deal of my work comes from travel, if not the majority of it. And in the current climate and the way things are shaping up, you have to question how much travel will be available, and how much people will want to travel to do things. So while there's opportunities to go abroad and shoot, that's fantastic, but there is the possibility that that kind of work is going to decrease. Maybe they will look at using less specialised photographers in the country where the event is happening, rather than take people who are potentially able to provide a better result, or know a little bit more about the requirements. Because of the constraints that are being placed, we don't know what's going to be happening with COVID going forward. Everything is speculation at the moment. People are opening up their countries, and then we see spikes going on. The USA is facing huge issues, and I mean that alone is a huge part of the world's sports and athletes and things like this. So
of course, yeah.
Not only can they not hold events, but they can also not travel to other countries to compete and things like this. So
yeah, do you want to find yourself in a country when it suddenly locks down and you can't get back to your home, for example?
Yeah, this can happen too. We have one of our cliff divers, Iris Schmidbauer from Germany. She's been stranded. I don't know. She's been lucky to be in New Zealand for the last 6 months. I mean, she got stuck there when COVID came on, and she's still there.
Crikey. Yeah, well, that's a very good view, and one that seems to be kind of resonating across a lot of people I speak to. So, yeah, thanks for that insight, and thanks for the last hour of chat. I don't actually know where that hour's gone. I was monitoring the time very carefully, and then suddenly I'm like, oh God, we've kind of run out of time. So I'm going to say a big thank you to you for joining me in your.
Oh, thank you, Charlie. It was good fun.
Your photography basement, and it was a great location to have an interview. I'm really glad you joined. It's been very nice to see you. Stay on the line. We'll have a little catch up, but I'll just say a goodbye now and finish the broadcast.
All right, thanks very much.
So that was good. That was a great chat. I don't know where the time went with Dean there this week. Next week, I'm going to be joined by Garth Millan, who will take us through some of his very exciting imagery from the world of motocross. Now, just as a final pointer, should you be interested in purchasing any imagery from either my collection or progressively ones from the photographers with whom I've been speaking, do head over to charliepinphoto.co.uk, where you'll be able to purchase my work and those who I've interviewed in the coming weeks. For now, that leaves me just to say thank you very much, goodbye, and thank you for joining, and until the next one. Ciao for now.